This trip was supposed to be a wonderful vacation for the Riley family, Kevin, his wife Julia, and their son Andy. Kevin is a doctor, approaches the trip with his usual sense of responsibility, checking the weather forecast in advance. In the Caribbean, the weather is impeccably sunny. Some might say it's the perfect start to a vacation. But if only he knew that, in this beautiful weather, events from a nightmare were awaiting them, and that soon, his family's survival would depend entirely on him. Julia found a cheap tour in the Caribbean, a chance to spend time together, which is exactly what a vacation is for. The family packs their bags. Andy is excited. He wants to try driving a jet ski like his friend Colin. His dad promises to make his son's dream come true. But before they leave, their neighbor Lucas warns them of danger. There are dangerous areas in the Caribbean where they're going. He advises them to offer the hotel administrator more money to get a better room. This surprises Kevin, but he doesn't attach much importance to the warnings of danger. The family boards the plane. Little Andy, looking out the window, asks his father if Treasure Island even exists. Kevin enthusiastically explains that, yes, of course it does. Hundreds of years ago, pirates hid their treasures on uninhabited islands. Upon arrival, they are greeted by an incredible sunny landscape with palm trees and a warm breeze. At the front desk, Kevin remembers Lucas's advice and immediately offers extra money. The man at the front desk happily agrees to find them something better. In the new room, Julia and Kevin feel a bit nostalgic, remembering the time after they were married, their honeymoon. At first glance, everything is perfect. The family is relaxing on the beach. Kevin wants to book a jet ski ride. He did promise his son. But the employee says there are no spots left. Everything is already booked for the day. Kevin tries to bribe the employee with money and explains how much his son dreamed of riding a jet ski. But in response, he only hears, "It's all booked. Those are the rules." Instead, they offer him to rent a motorboat from the guys at the pier. It's not what Andy wanted, but it's something. At the pier, the boys are loudly advertising their boats. Kevin chooses a red one. The employee doesn't take any of Kevin's details, not even his name, but he explains how to steer it and takes the payment. The family heads out into the sea. They enjoy the view in the middle of the sea. Little Andy touches the steering wheel, just as he wanted. Suddenly, Julia notices she can't see the shore, which makes her nervous. Time passes, and it's time to head back. Safety first. At that moment, Andy sees a silhouette on the horizon, an island. "Are there treasures there?" he asks. Father and son convince Julia to go there. She thinks it's a dangerous idea, but agrees to go along. On the island, Julia says she will wait by the boat and read a book because she's not very interested in looking for treasures. Father and son go to explore the shore and find a beautiful Strombus seashell. The day passes pleasantly. The family is already thinking about what to order for dinner when they get back to the hotel. Maybe sushi rolls. But when they want to head back, the boat's engine won't start. Kevin tries again and again, but it's no use. They've gone far enough, and there isn't another boat in sight. Kevin inspects the engine, no change. Time passes, and it's already dark. Then Kevin confesses. He rented the boat for cash from strangers at the pier. They didn't take any of his details and didn't even write down his name. The situation looks like a complete disaster. Kevin thinks they could try to paddle back manually, but he can't imagine how far they are. They were speeding for an hour. The decision is to wait until morning. They need to sleep and gather their strength. The family spends the night on the island. In the morning, Kevin tries to deal with the engine again, suspecting the battery is the problem. Little Andy already has a headache, but his father doesn't lose heart and assures his son that everything will be okay. He even reminds him that pirates once went without food for weeks and considered it an adventure. The optimism sounds strange, but keeps them going. Suddenly, they see a boat on the horizon and shout at the top of their lungs, waving. But they are not noticed. This deeply worries Julia. How long can they last without water? In the middle of the night, Julia wakes up and can't believe this is really happening. That feeling when you've just woken up and need a few seconds to remember what situation you're in. In the morning, Kevin notices that the child's heart rate is off the charts. His heart can't pump blood properly because of the heat. The situation is becoming critical. They decide they need to go out on the water, where there's a higher chance of being noticed. Kevin is ready to paddle manually to get them into the open sea. After that, everything will depend on luck. They drift, exhausted, and at some point, their boat washes up on another island. Kevin notices this when he wakes up. There's another boat nearby. A man who approaches gives them water and asks who they are. In the conversation, Kevin mentions he is a doctor and immediately shows how to provide help to his family and where to apply wet compresses on thinner skin areas, the wrists and neck. The stranger fiddles with their boat's engine. Kevin asks him to help the child, and the stranger hands the boy over to his Spanish-speaking partner, Jorge. And then, something the family could not have expected began. A demand for a reward. The man says, "I'll save your family, but I need a reward. How much is your family's life worth?" A question too cynical to bear. Kevin desperately offers all his savings, $40,000. For the stranger, this is too little. He wants $1 million. He reproaches Kevin, saying, "You are a doctor, you are rich, and you spend a lot on vacation, but Kevin is a county doctor. He doesn't earn millions." Kevin is shocked by the cynicism and begs him not to abandon his family. They don't agree on a sum. The stranger insists on $1 million. The stranger hits Kevin with an oar, and he loses consciousness. When he wakes up, Kevin realizes a terrible fact. His hands are tied, and his wife and son are not there. They were left on the island. The stranger says it plainly. Only after $1 million is transferred will they go back for his family. All of Kevin's pleas are in vain. The stranger claims there are dozens of islands around, and only he knows exactly where he left their family. Now they are heading to the city, so Kevin can transfer the money to this scoundrel. Kevin has to act. He calls his colleagues and boss, begging for money, but he can't give them details. Some don't answer, others say it will take time. He calls Lucas, the neighbor who warned him about the dangers in the Caribbean. Lucas owed the Riley family a debt, so he can send some funds. Then Kevin goes to the bank to check how much money is in his account. After the transfer from Lucas, there is now $193,000. This is still not enough for the brazen stranger, but after negotiations, they agree that this sum will have to do. The bank employee notices the tense conversation but doesn't take any action. She doesn't care. The stranger gives Kevin a boat to go after them and find out where his family's island is, but he locks him in the cabin. While they are sailing, the stranger deliberately starts to destroy the boat Kevin is in. Water quickly rushes into the cabin. Desperate pleas fail. This stranger is simply heartless. The stranger's partner watches everything nervously. The boat flips over, which gives Kevin a chance. He finds a small air pocket, tears off the steering lever, and uses it to try to break the window. He succeeds and surfaces. As he is being carried by the water, a tourist boat with people on it floats past, and they throw him a lifebuoy. He is rescued and taken to the police. Detective Constable Hagen arrives, and the police have already notified the U.S. Embassy about the incident. The police explain the scale of the problem to him. The search area is about 2,000 square miles, almost the size of the state of Delaware. In this zone, there are hundreds of islands and isthmuses. The search could take weeks. This infuriates Kevin. His family could die in a short amount of time, and it's unknown if they'll survive even a day. Kevin is desperate to find the man who blackmailed him. All he knows about him is that he's a fisherman, and his partner's name is Jorge. The detective asks about the money that was transferred to the bank account, but no one saw Kevin's wife and son get into the boat. The detective begins to suspect that it's some sort of money laundering scheme. He finds it hard to believe the family was on the boat. Everything looks like a theater of the absurd, a nightmare that became reality. An unknown fisherman left your family to die, demanding $1 million, and the police don't believe your version. A bitter irony of fate. In a grim mood, Kevin returns to the hotel room and reflects on the fisherman's words. He goes to the computer area and prints out a map of the islands. A man who loves to fish is sitting nearby at a computer. He explains that after a fisherman catches a fish, he either releases it or sells it. This standard remark gives Kevin an idea. If he can find a buyer who buys fish from local fishermen, maybe he will recognize the scoundrel. The idea is simple. Find a buyer who is in contact with all the fishermen. Kevin takes a taxi and sets off to find someone in the fishing community who could help him. He is directed to a cafe where fishermen gather after work. There, he looks for Jorge, but he isn't there. The detective is constantly calling and suspects Kevin of something illegal. There's almost no trust from the police, and his moral strength is dwindling. Suddenly, Kevin notices a scar on the taxi driver similar to the one he saw on the fisherman who abandoned his family. It turns out that these stitches were done at the local hospital. There is only one here. Kevin goes to the hospital. There, he begs the doctor to give him information about patients who had stitches. As a doctor, he knows the stitches are fresh, about a week old. After he shows a photo of his family, the doctor is sympathetic and gives him a chance to look through the records on her computer himself. And bingo, he finds a name, Miguel Caba. There is an address. Kevin takes a scalpel from a nightstand and goes straight there. When he knocks on the door, a woman's voice asks who he is, but then there's silence. The next moment, Kevin breaks down the door. Inside the apartment, a woman panics and says she doesn't know anything. There is also a sick child there. In the hallway, Kevin sees a photo of the scoundrel with the name of his boat and takes a picture of it. At that moment, Miguel enters the house. A confrontation is unavoidable. Kevin loudly demands that Miguel take him to the island to his family. The situation escalates. Miguel's wife grabs a harpoon. Suddenly, a second child comes out of a room, and instead of de-escalating, Kevin, in a panic, starts to make threats and hides behind the child. This terrible act has dire consequences. When Miguel throws down the harpoon, it fires on its own and hits the child, also grazing Kevin. The scene turns into chaos with screams of despair. A fight breaks out between Miguel and Kevin. In the scuffle, Kevin grabs the scalpel and fights back, and Miguel is no longer alive. Kevin wakes up in the hospital, surrounded by police. The detective explains the reality to the man. His actions led to a double murder. The detective is convinced that Kevin was involved in something illegal from the very beginning. The ambassador of the United States announces that the search for his family has been called off. The situation becomes even more complicated. They want to transfer Kevin to a pretrial detention center. In desperation and rage, he snatches a gun from a police officer and threatens, "Follow me and I'll shoot." And at that moment, he escapes from the hospital. The detective runs after him and tries to stop his escape, pointing his weapon, but doesn't fire. Kevin just walks away. In the morning, Kevin finds some clothes to change into at a local street market. His wound from the harpoon is still bleeding, though not heavily. He tries to find Miguel's boat by number, but he is told that it takes about an hour to sail from here. Also, the rental for the spot ended yesterday, so they advise him to rent a boat from locals if he wants to go by himself. The man sits by the water in despair, gazing at the sea. There, he notices a random man talking on his phone. Suddenly, the man calls the embassy and says that Miguel called Jorge from his cell phone, meaning he can be tracked. Kevin demands that they track Jorge and bring him to the main square of the city. Only then will he promise to surrender to the police. The ambassador tries to calm Kevin down and asks him not to do anything rash. The detective is already waiting in the square, but Kevin sees that Jorge isn't there. He calls the detective. The police claim they called Jorge, but he disappeared. The detective convinces Kevin to surrender, but he hangs up and gets on a bus. Tears fill his eyes, and suddenly, Jorge is on the bus! As soon as Jorge realizes he's been recognized, he starts to run. Kevin asks him to stop, and although Jorge doesn't understand much English, Kevin uses broken Spanish to convey the truth about his family. An absurd thing happens. At that moment, Jorge is hit by a pickup car. The injured Jorge is the last person who could have given them any information. The pickup driver doesn't even have a phone, and they can't call for an ambulance. Kevin shows Jorge the map. Barely holding on, he points a finger at one of the islands. This is Kevin's only hope. They put Jorge in the back of the truck, and the driver takes him to the hospital. Kevin runs to the pier. There, he finds some tourists who initially refuse to take him. In despair, he fires a shot into the air, and they voluntarily hand over their speedboat. But there's very little fuel. He needs to refuel. Meanwhile, the police are getting closer. A chase begins. The Coast Guard gives a final warning. If you don't stop, we'll start shooting. And they do. Kevin throws away the gun and floors the gas. The boat pulls away from the police, and he races at maximum speed toward the island where he hopes to find his family. Under the scorching sun, he calls out for Julia and follows footprints in the sand, and finally, he sees his wife and son. He gives water to his wife, tries to give his son artificial respiration, and Andy starts breathing. They're alive. It's impossible to believe, but he managed to find his family, to be reunited with them after the horror they went through. However, their strength hasn't returned yet. The son is weak, and the wife is unconscious. Kevin carries his son to the boat, but when he lifts Julia and carries her to the boat, the harpoon wound bleeds more and more heavily. He doesn't manage to carry her all the way. He falls, exhausted, along with her. And just a moment later, a rescue helicopter arrives. The sound of the helicopter brings Julia and Kevin back to consciousness. Did they survive? By all accounts, yes. The rescuers arrived, and they probably understood that everything Kevin so desperately tried to tell the police was true. This incredibly difficult path that Kevin took to save his family was full of desperate, terrible acts. His actions caused grief to Miguel's family, but in the end, he was able to save his wife and son. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on interesting stories. And may your vacations be better than the Riley families.